So that's what POP stands for, right? Prosthetics, orthotics, and pedorthics. So I am a POP ambassador. I just love what I get to do on a daily basis, and I love encouraging people to become involved.
Hello, everyone. I welcome you to the We're Not Stumped podcast. I'm your host, Mike Boland, and today I welcome Chris Baschuk. Chris is an expert in upper limb prosthetics and a leader in additive manufacturing. He's the Director of Clinical Services at Point Designs and the Chair of the Upper Limb Prosthetic Society. Today, we're going to be diving into innovation, advocacy, and what it truly means to empower people with limb loss. Chris, first of all, thank you for taking the time to be on the We're Not Stumped podcast.
Well, thanks, Mike, for inviting me and having me. I'm excited to be here today with you.
I'm looking forward to learn. It's always fun to learn from people that are in the industry, even though I have upper limb loss. I don't wear a prosthetic. I used to. And I know we just had a few minutes of a conversation, and I can tell I'm just going to learn so much. And I know the listeners will learn a lot too. But the first thing I'd like them to learn a little bit more about is you. Can you tell us a little bit about your story and how you got into prosthetics?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the opportunity. Yeah, it's kind of interesting that, as I was thinking about it and preparing for coming on here, it is interesting in that I didn't know anybody with limb difference or limb loss growing up, to be honest. But I've ever since I was a little kid, I loved to mess around with tools and in my garage, my dad's tools, and learned how to make things. Did Boy Scouts, was an Eagle Scout, and just always loved to tinker and build. And as I went to graduated from high school and went to college, it took me a little bit of time to find what my undergrad career was going to be. I started out as a business major, and then I went to computer engineering and computer science because that's what my dad does. He's a computer programmer. But after sitting in a library at 3:00 in the morning typing up code in a cubicle, I realized that's not the career I want. And I want to do stuff tangibly with my hands, and so I found biomedical engineering, and that set me on the course. At the time, I was at the University of Southern California, and there they were actually studying these little implantable electrodes to go into the muscles to then be able to take that and control upper limb prostheses. So I found that really fascinating. But then I ended up taking a 2-year hiatus from my college degree to serve a mission for my church down in Brazil. Wow. And while I was down there, I encountered many individuals with various different levels of limb difference as well as deformities and in need of orthoses. And actually, while I was down there, I hurt my foot. I broke some bones in my foot, and I went to the doctor, and the doctor told me that I needed to get some sort of a boot to stabilize my foot so that as I'm walking around, I wasn't going to hurt it any further. And when I asked the doctor, where can I get one of those? He said, well, I don't know. It was that sort of a resource poor area that I was serving in. So I ended up going to a metal fabrication facility, and I took the insole out of my shoe and had them cut out a piece of 1/8-inch thick steel plate and put that inside my shoe and walked around. And so that really just kind of opened my eyes. I knew that I always wanted to be able to come back and go back there at some point to give back and do things. And that kind of also steered my mind as far as wanting to be involved with medical devices and things like that. So fast forward, I finish up my mission, come home, end up transferring to the University of Utah because they had a bioengineering program that was ranked 10 schools higher than the University of Southern California's, and it happened to be 1/10 of the cost.
Wow.
And so I got into the program there and got connected up with the orthopedic research lab at the University of Utah, where they were studying osseointegration. So direct skeletal attachment of prostheses to limbs. At the time, we had a herd of sheep running around on these osseointegrated implants that we were developing. And I thought I was going to go to medical school at that point and be the surgeon who was going to be working with the amputees, but putting those implants into them, and realized I still love to build things. And I love to have more direct patient contact. And so I was on a business trip in Berlin, Germany, of all places. I'm walking down the road, and off in the distance, it was evening. I saw on the side of this building there was these dots that were flashing, and they were moving across the side of the building. And when I looked at it closely, coming from a biomedical engineering background, I looked at it, that looks like a person walking across the building, and it looked like the dots that you would have on markers for a gate lab, uh, you know. And as I get closer, sure enough, that's what it was. And then I look at the side of the building, and there's this name, Autobach. I was like, what is Autobach?
Mm.
And so, being jet lagged and not being able to sleep that night, I looked up Autobach and find out, oh, they're this prosthetics manufacturer. And well, there's got to be somebody who actually makes the devices then that these individuals are using. And so then I started to research that a little bit more. And at the time, I came across the onpcareers.org website, which is now kind of the whatispop.org
Yeah.
website, right? And found out all about the career there, and what it takes to become a prosthetist, and that it was transitioning at the time to a master's degree, and that kind of interests me. And so when I got back from that trip, I talked to my wife about it, and I applied to school and ended up going to UT Southwestern, and got my master's in prosthetics and orthotics. And even when I did that, though, I knew that I wanted to do hands. That was like my passion. I just fascinated by all the articulations in the hands, the fact that we use our hands to interact with the world versus our lower extremities. We just get around in the world. And so I wanted to do that, and that's kind of what got me on the course. I ended up doing a research project, got some funding through the OPERF at the time, the Orthotic Prosthetic Education and Research Foundation. Got a grant to do some research for upper limb harnessing, and that made me some connections, and made other connections through the Academy, the American Academy of Orthotists and Prosthetists, with the Upper Limb Prosthetic Society. And that set me on my trajectory to where I am now.
Oh,
It's a
that's
long answer.
fantastic. I was going to ask you what made you target the upper limb, and I already showed you this, but I'll show the viewers too, that I have. Since I knew I was going to have an upper limb person, I was like, yeah, I got to show my old hook. This is from probably the late 70s.
Yeah.
Even in your time, though, what have you seen? What are the differences and what are the advancements that you've seen in the upper limb prosthetic field?
Yeah. So I mean, right when I joined the field was actually when the code for the multi-articulated hands was established. And so I kind of entered the field right when those were actually starting to catch on as a viable option. And then shortly after I got out of school, I got to start playing around with the pattern recognition. At the time, Coapt was the only company that had a commercially available system. So the control strategy side of things has definitely evolved when you're talking about the myoelectrics. Um, but when it comes down to a lot of the way that we go about doing things, it's the same processes, just we're utilizing different materials nowadays. So I mean that's something that I've evolved in my clinical practice. When I started out, I was definitely doing everything kind of with the traditional manufacturing methods, with thermoplastics and laminations and composites and things like that. But nowadays, I do almost everything exclusively via additive manufacturing.
Wow.
And that's a huge difference. And the only thing that we're really still utilizing traditional manufacturing for are the custom silicone interfaces that we make. And for the foreseeable future, there's really not a good way to do additive manufacturing with that, because of all the different things that we have to integrate into it to accommodate people's needs. So
Got it. And for people that are maybe going through their own journey right now and are just listening very early on, can you give a definition from your perspective of the additive manufacturing and what that means, especially within prosthetics?
yeah, so I mean, additive manufacturing is just a different method of manufacturing. And sometimes people get kind of scared of the terminology. 3D printing is thrown around as a term all the time as well. Um, they're synonymous, but it's really the method of only taking the materials that you need and building the device that you need. And it's typically done in a layer by layer fashion for a particular device. And so there are many different methods of additive manufacturing that exist. Not all are created equally. At Point Designs, we utilize multiple different methods for different aspects based on the material properties and characteristics that we're trying to achieve. And so that's something that's very unique because we can create structures and materials that, although they may be made with the same base material, raw material, if you will, but by utilizing additive manufacturing and integrating things like lattice structures and variable wall thickness and whatnot, we can actually make that material function in a way that is desirable to us, that with a high level of precision that you can't do with your traditional methods of manufacturing. And just for for the audience who's listening, traditional manufacturing looks more like either you take a flat sheet of plastic and you heat it up and then you vacuum it over a model of the shape that you're working with, or you take fabrics like carbon fiber and Kevlar and fiberglass and you wrap those around a model and then you inject resin and under a vacuum, and then that once that resin solidifies, then you have this hard shape. Then you have to cut away all the extra material left from that. So and when you do that, you just don't have the same level of precision in that construction that you do when you're utilizing additive manufacturing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that. I actually learned a little bit right there myself. I just want to remind everyone I'm on with Chris Baschuk. He can be found at Point Designs. He's at Point Designs, pointdesigns.com. I've also had, I think, 3 other people with a relationship, certainly Levin Sliker, who I believe is the CEO there. Is that
Yes,
true?
yes.
Yeah. And
No?
then 2 of your ambassadors, Angie Coe and Jeff Solberg. And I know they love and rave about your product. It's fantastic. Now, does 3D printing come into play at all too with what you do?
Yeah. So almost everything exclusively that we do at Point Designs involves 3D printing or additive manufacturing in some
Okay.
way. Got a sample
Oh,
device hanging out right here.
hey,
Just
it happens to be a right hand. Can I borrow it?
yeah, it's rather handy to have it.
Hey, yeah.
Uh, so the model that this is sitting on, our demonstration unit here, that is completely 3D printed. The silicone portion, this portion that's the multicolored portion,
Hmm.
the red and the black with the zipper in it, that is the custom silicone work that we do here at Point Designs to make that interface that goes directly up against the skin. And we have to do that with traditional methods of manufacturing. There's just no way to do that with additive. But everything else that you see here actually is additively manufactured. So the frame here of the prosthesis, the digits themselves are additively manufactured out of titanium. So yeah, it's a big part of what we do.
Ah, that was really, and again, it's very, very handy to have it right there. And I, I like it, especially I use that term myself, even though it's hard for me to be handy in some things. Now you're the director of clinical services at Point Designs, but you're also the chair of the Upper Limb Prosthetic Society, and that might be enhancing in the future. What is that society all about? And can you describe that a little bit?
Yeah, so the Upper Limb Prosthetic Society is a scientific society within the American Academy of Orthotists and Prosthetists. And the American Academy of Orthotists and Prosthetists is an organization of providers and manufacturers of prosthetic and orthotic technology. It is a place of education and research to further access to care and outcomes for individuals who need the products and services that we as a profession provide. And so the Upper Limb Prosthetic Society is a subset of individuals within the academy that have an interest and want to have more dedicated focus on upper limb prosthetics. And when I joined the academy as a student back when I was in my master's program, I got involved in the Upper Limb Prosthetic Society and just volunteered, did some projects, and that volunteerism got me to get to know the leaders of that society very well, and they have all become long-term mentors to me. At the time, it was Chris Lake, who was the chair of the society at that time, and that was followed by Pat Prigge, and both of those they're some of my closest friends within this profession, and have just mentored me immensely throughout my career. And without them and that that guidance, I wouldn't be where I am today. And so I definitely give a lot of credit to the Upper Limb Prosthetic Society as being a mechanism through which myself as a student who had, just rudimentary knowledge of our profession could find my way to becoming an upper limb prosthetic specialist. And now, the director of clinical services at an upper limb specialty manufacturer. So we do, as the Upper Limb Prosthetic Society, we do meetings on a monthly basis. We get together as society members at the academy meeting. We always put on organized sessions where we're sharing additional knowledge and information. We put out publications with the Academy Today issues that we tend to put one out every about 2 years with regard to those. We just had one come out recently. And then the big lift that we've done as the Upper Limb Prosthetic Society most recently is with respect to coding and reimbursement for upper limb prostheses. It's kind of a long story, but there's been a long period of time where nobody's really paid good close attention to the codes that are available to pay and cover for upper limb prostheses. And some things transpired that kind of led us to the point where we recognize that we really need to jump in and get involved more directly to try and administer those code sets better. Medicare is the one who's responsible for setting those codes and establishing reimbursement. So we educated ourselves on what the process is to get new codes or updates to codes, and in particular for the partial hand patient population. We knew that there was a significant gap in the code set there. And so we worked really hard to put some applications together. And during the last coding cycle, we were successful in getting 7 new codes established, specifically related to partial hand prostheses. We also got 2 additional upper limb related codes modified so that they would also include partial hand prostheses. And that was in the first round. And then actually just this week on Monday, I was in Washington, D.C. at Medicare presenting for our second round of codes that we've applied for to get a new base code for partial hand, as well as a new base code for partial finger, a custom static post for partial hand. And then as point designs, we also applied for codes for every single one of our products to be able to get those covered by insurance. So a lot going on there on the advocacy front recently as well.
Yeah, I learned from Jeff Solberg when I met him. I probably met him, it's going on 3 years. It's hard to believe, but I learned from him how difficult it is for the partial hand, especially like people that are missing fingers. It seems like they are like the forgotten people that are in the amputee community or in the limb loss community. Why do you think that is?
It's been a lack of a couple of things. So back in the 1960s and 70s, there used to be a couple of different types of devices beyond just silicone fingers that were available. They're called the Robinades devices. And they were these cable-driven fingers that you could fit on somebody who was missing part of their fingers. And they worked fairly well. But over time with the Medicare code set, there ended up being reductions in the number of codes that were available. And ultimately, the reimbursement level as well for those codes was not kept up to date sufficiently to provide a sufficient amount of reimbursement so that the prosthetists and orthotists who have to buy the physical components and then provide the care, and then that number that they get paid is to cover both the care and the device. It's not just for the device. Was too low, and so they couldn't afford to actually even buy the components anymore. And as they couldn't buy the components anymore, then that manufacturer ultimately went out of business. They weren't able to be able to produce those devices anymore. And as that happened, the way that our educational system works is that it on every couple of years they reevaluate how many types of or how many patients of each different patient population the average practitioner takes care of on a daily or annual basis. And because they were no longer components for them to buy, they were seeing less of these patients. And so because they were seeing less of that patient population, then our educational curriculum they decreased the amount of time that they devoted and spent educating on that, to the point where actually, when I went through school, we didn't even talk about this patient population entirely. And so that kind of got to a point where it became an orphaned patient population in a lot of ways, with the only option that these individuals were told that they had was to get a silicone restoration or finger, or or quote unquote rubber finger.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there was also this misconception that this patient population and amputations of fingers is a quote unquote minor amputation. You can actually go back in the textbooks all the way back to 1917. A. Marks wrote this textbook on artificial limbs, and the chapter on partial hand, which is actually a pretty thorough chapter, but the chapter begins out by saying, although a partial hand or finger amputation is unfortunate, it cannot be considered consequential.
Wow.
So the textbooks all the way back from them kind of just dismissed it as, you can just deal with it, sort of an amputation. It shouldn't be perceived as anything more than minor. So fortunately, with additive manufacturing, for one, I mean, that's how Point Designs was founded. We were able to start developing some new types of terminal devices and options for partial hand. And so now there's more interest in the patient population. Again, we actually have options that we can provide them. And so now there's been kind of a renaissance, if you will, as to being able to care for this patient population. So now that we have the technology, it's now our responsibility as a profession to go back to Medicare and say, hey, we have technology, we've shown it's effective. Now we need to be able to have coding to support that technology so that it's more broadly accessible. So that's what we're doing.
Thank you for that explanation. I bet you that the person in 1917 that wrote that forward to that chapter probably had all 10 of his fingers, I would imagine, right? Because
Yeah.
it's not an easy battle. I mean, it doesn't matter what you're missing, that's for sure. And I know that at Point Designs, we talked about this earlier, kind of go on the personal front. It's a family affair there, right? Your wife Shannon also works there.
She does. Yes. Technically she was employee number 12 and I was employee number 13.
Yeah,
So I
excellent.
started about 2 months after she did. But she and I had worked together prior to Point Designs as well. She became a prosthetic technician and was doing the custom silicone work that I kind of talked about a little bit before. Um, and so when we came up with this concept, talking to Levin about how we could actually not only have the digits that Point Designs manufactures, but actually offer a full service where we can help prosthetists be able to care for this patient population better. She was the one who jumped on board first and started to get things going, and then I joined about 2 months later, and yep, she's still here today as our lab manager here at our facility in Bountiful, Utah.
Yeah, it's a great organization. Very, like I said, I've had three reps from there. Everyone there has just been fantastic. And if you want to learn more, go to pointdesigns.com. Another website, and this is pretty much how I was directed to you. Is it what's pop.org, if I'm correct?
Yeah, what is pop.org?
And
Yes.
what is that about? And who does that?
So what is POP is a career guidance sort of website. The American Board for Certification in Prosthetics, Orthotics, and Podorthics helps to support that and fund that as a conduit to help people find out how they can be involved in the prosthetics, orthotics, and podorthics professions. So that's what POP stands for, right? Prosthetics, orthotics, and podorthics. Um, and so I am a POP ambassador on there. And so if you are interested in my journey, or how you could potentially become involved in the profession, I'm available as a resource. I love taking those phone calls and responding to those inquiries. And I just love what I get to do on a daily basis, and I love encouraging people to become involved. And I'm completely transparent too. I try and tell them the things that I wish other people would have told me about the profession as well. Just to make sure that they come in with eyes wide open and they don't feel blindsided or anything by that.
And that is what's POP. What is POP? I should say
What
dot
is
org.
pop.org? Yes.
I'll have it linked in the description, but I want to make sure that people just listening, they can get to it. As you
Yeah.
look forward, What do you see, both professionally and personally, maybe the next 5 years and where things are headed for you and the organization?
Yeah, so as a profession, we are becoming to be we're trying to be more engaged, with Medicare, for example, trying to be willing and active participants in the processes that are established. There's a lot of advocacy efforts too to help kind of change the way that the system cares for amputees and those with limb difference and um, also mobility issues. So I see myself continuing to be involved in those efforts. I have the privilege. I was just elected to the board of the American Academy of Orthotists and Prosthetists, so that's going to be a kind of a
Congratulations.
new endeavor for me for the next 3 years as a new board member. So we'll get to participate a little bit more actively in how the academy functions and what its objectives and goals are, and how it can better serve our profession. I think that's the biggest thing is that we're trying to make the academy the professional home for clinicians to have the resources that they need to be able to better care for the patients that they serve. Um, and then I think we're just going to keep growing, and I think as we get these new codes for partial hand prostheses, I think it's going to provide greater access to care for these individuals, and I'm really excited to continue working and educating other prosthetists like myself on how to care for this patient population and provide them with the resources. And so, that's a really important thing here at Point Designs for us too. Is we don't just make devices; we want to really revolutionize the care for this patient population and be a resource to everybody, so that when those patients walk through their door that could benefit from the devices that we provide, that they'll feel supported and educated to the point where they know that they can adequately care for this patient population.
That's fantastic. Chris Baschuk, pointdesigns.com, whatispop.org, and a lot of different ways you can find him. Chris, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the We're Not Some podcast. I learned a lot today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I enjoyed talking to you, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the We're Not Stump podcast. I have an ask for everyone that got to this point of the podcast. Please like, share, and subscribe. The reason is simple. These stories need to be shared. It would help it to get out there to the people that really need to hear these stories.